Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Predictive Analytics with Rhys T. Fertiller, Dad Jeff, joined by Jeff Haseley. Jeff, how are you doing this evening?
I am good. We are in week one mode, and I'm excited for football. I'm excited for everything to hopefully get back to normal, if we want to call it that, in terms of the football season. But I'm just looking forward to Thursday night's game, starting off with the Texans and the Chiefs and a playoff rematch. So, let's get to it.
Yep. And so Jeff and I have gone back. We go back years, long years at Football Guys. Good relationship with Rhys. Very comfortable. And you'll see Rhys look in his little book. It's really a fat book. And since I had to edit it becomes fatter and fatter. And looking for stats. As we look at, we're just going to cover matchups, but there's 16 of them, and we'll rock through them. Houston at KC, Jeff. Is there, KC's a big home favorite. A lot's going on. What are your initial thoughts about this game?
Hmm. My initial thoughts are that KC should win handedly, but we're not really quite sure what to expect as far as the home team, the home crowd, the whole 2020 process. There's no preseason for these teams. Are they even the top teams, right? The teams that have had no changes with coaches or quarterbacks, are even those teams going to have some um, growing pains here with week one? And so in that regard, I'm a little bit leery, but this is the highest game total for the entire week. I think it's 54 points
Yes.
combined between the two. So Vegas is expecting a lot of points in this. I'm not so sure, to be honest with you, just because, what if we see teams, especially offenses, struggle a little bit in the first game? We haven't seen anything yet, so I'm a little bit leery about the total here. How about you?
I think, and this is fancy or the total. I think, as a rule, we'll see most of the games go under the Vegas total this week. No
Uh-huh.
preseason, very limited training camp, no hitting, lots of turnovers, lots of sacks. I see a lower scoring game. And then I see news out. We're recording this on Tuesday evening. See the news out that Brandon Cooks missed today's practice. Makes me think, so Houston
Yeah.
has a new running back. They trade away Hopkins. Now the wide receiver they depend on most. Oh, man.
Yeah, and Jeff, I caught the news that Travis Kelsey had a hyperextended knee. I'm not sure how severe that is, but that sounds kind of concerning a little bit. Has anything come up from that yet, or is that just a precaution?
He practiced today. He was fine.
He was good. Okay, so that must have been just a precaution. I saw it earlier in the morning and didn't really see much afterthought.
Well, as my dad mentioned about the huge, as KC is big favorites, they are in fact the largest kickoff game favorites ever, according to Yahoo Sports. But also, both teams in this game last season allowed over 28 PPR points, fantasy points to running backs last season,
That's for the whole season or just the kickoff game?
whole season.
So you're saying that Houston gave up 28 PPR points to opposing running backs, and so did KC.
Yes.
What would that incline you to think on fantasy?
Both those, especially Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but both DJ and CEH are definite starts, but especially CEH with the -9 spread. If you're up that much, you're probably going to want to run the ball more, even if it is Andy Reid and Mahomes.
Yeah, but it also makes me think Duke Johnson and Darrell Williams may be sneaky starts for teams struggling. What are you thinking, Jeff?
Well, it sounds like you're suggesting that there's going to be a high points total, and both Jeff and I think that that number is probably going to be lower than what Vegas has. And if we said the total was 54, we're thinking probably around 50, 49-ish or so points, or anything lower than 54. That's an interesting stat though about the running backs, and I mean you're not going to not start these backs, so it just seems like it's a pretty good matchup for both.
Well, they could each get 28 PPR points and the total go under.
Correct.
just from passes out of the backfield.
Right.
But that's
Right.
to your point, you don't get 28 fantasy points without touchdowns very frequently. And so anyway, it's an interesting game for me. Just I really think KC, we get to see how they're going to use CEH, and that's what I'm most excited about in this game. Houston, Bill O'Brien with David Johnson, I have a pretty good feel because he had Carlos Hyde last year. But with if Brandon Cooks can't go, I'm super interested to see how KC's running backs, the rotation, all that stuff. Seattle at Atlanta. Seattle road favorite, which is pretty interesting to me because Atlanta's a decent team. It's a lot of push on Seattle. Long trip, begin the season. I'm interested to see how healthy Carson is. What are you thinking, Jeff, on this?
Well, the line is what did you say? 1.5?
1-2.
Okay.
Seattle at Atlanta.
So that sounds like it's a game that is going to be fairly close, and that seems to be the case with Russell Wilson games. Didn't we see him have X amount of games last year that were within 3 points or something like that, if I recall?
Yes.
And he always seems to find a way to win, and that's why Seattle had as many wins as they did last year. So I see a close game here, and I mean, how can you go against Russell Wilson in terms of being able to pull it out? It's like certain quarterbacks just have that ability to do that. Aaron Rodgers can do it. Russell Wilson can do it. Tom Brady can do it. Just pulling games out at the end. If it's close near the end, he finds a way to win. And I kind of see that happening here with Seattle.
So we see Todd Gurley for the first time as a Falcon. We, all the debates on how many carries he's going to get, how many touches. We see Hayden Hurst filling in for Austin Hooper. We see Julio and Ridley healthy. It's interesting. Plus, I mentioned Hayden Hurst on one side. We also see a healthy Will Dissly as well as Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen from your neck of the woods coming out to Seattle. Seattle used the tight end well last year. I mean, the Seattle tight ends, whoever was starting, was a low-end fantasy one. Rhys, you have any thoughts on this?
Dan Quinn is playing against his old team, as he was defense coordinator when Legion of Boom was in full swing. But the last time these two teams played last season, Matt Ryan was injured, and Schaub made it a 7-point game after the Seahawks took a 24-0 lead. And Hurst, with his new team, gets an easy start as the Seahawks allowed the second most PPR fantasy points per game to tight ends last season.
Was number one Arizona?
Yes.
That was easy. So, Jeff, I will say that two teams that have bad defenses. I think Seattle we overrate because of historic success, but I'm questioning Seattle's defense.
Yeah, plus, well, they also got Jamal Adams, so he'll be a helpful contributor. And you have to look at both of these teams. They both have a returning quarterback. They both have a returning coaching staff. So this should be a pretty evenly matched game, and it's going to come down to the end, I think, down to the wire in terms of who can put it in the end zone or who can put the ball through the uprights when you need to. And the last team to score might be the one who comes away. So my lean is Seattle with the Russell Wilson factor.
Yes, he is underrated. So another game that I think is super interesting just because it's divisional is Cleveland at Baltimore. Baltimore's touchdown plus favorite. So we have Cleveland. Stefanski comes in. This is the day that Kareem Hunt gets his new deal, 2-year contract. Mm-hmm. Stefanski, how's he going to use the running backs? And is Baltimore going to be as efficient as they were last year? I mean, Baltimore was super efficient. What are your thoughts on this, Jeff?
Well, as long as it's not a playoff game, the Ravens are probably one of the best teams in the league. No, but I'm excited to see, as far as the Ravens are concerned, how well they play offensively, how well they play defensively. If they're a strong defense like we expect, maybe the offense doesn't have to do as much, especially against a team like Cleveland. So this seems like it's a high running game for Baltimore. And, of course, they led the league in rushing, not just with Lamar Jackson, but also with Mark Ingram and now J.K. Dobbins. How much is Dobbins going to get? Even if he gets like 8, 9 touches, what can you do with those touches? I'm interested to see that. So the snap counts, the snap percentages on both sides. You've got Chubb and you've got Hunt, as you mentioned, and also Ingram and Dobbins. How much Dobbins are we going to see? What about Marquise Brown? What's he going to do? There's a lot of fantasy specific impact players here in this game that I'm interested in seeing. Throw Jarvis Landry in there too, Odell Beckham. So, I mean, there's players in this game. And let's see, I'm showing 48.5 points in terms of Vegas total. That's fairly high. A lot of that, of course, coming from Baltimore.
Yeah, but I think that either if Baltimore covers, that it won't hit 48. You know what I mean? Because I don't think Baltimore is going to hit all 48 by themselves. And so, well, maybe not. Lamar Jackson fantasy managers would be happy. What are you thinking, Rhys?
You mentioned the Cleveland wide receivers, but remember last year, Humphrey and OBJ got into it a little bit in a scuffle. Plus, Peters versus Landry is not a necessarily good fantasy matchup for him. And even if they put him in the slot, he has to go up against Jimmy Smith. But on the Nick Chubb side, last time he played a game in Baltimore, he burst off for 165 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns.
A little bit of history.
Yes.
We appreciate you bringing the strength there, son.
Yeah,
And,
that's good stuff. Rhys, that's strong. Are you reading from that, or is that in your head?
I looked it up a little bit, but I remember he went off for a lot because I was playing against him, and he had Chubb, so I remembered it from there. So I just went to see the exact numbers.
Gotcha. Well, it's definitely appreciated here during this talk.
The other thought I had is if Baltimore is really going to control the game, which we think may happen, it may be more of a Hunt game than a Chubb game.
Yes, because the reason last time that Chubb did so well is that was the last loss Baltimore had before the Titans snuck up on them.
Gotcha. Now that was in his head. All right, moving on to the Jets at Buffalo. So this is one of those that are the Jets as bad as the beating they take, right? Yeah. You know, is Le'Veon Bell going to get the ball? Is Perriman really hurt that badly? And then you flip it with Buffalo. Is Josh Allen going to redeem himself after that playoff debacle in Houston? Is Zach Moss going to see the ball, or is it going to be Singletary? I mean, like, there's a lot of narratives in here. What are you thinking, Jeff, as Buffalo's touchdown favorite at home with a low total? And I think that low total speaks for both offenses.
I think that low total is even high.
Yeah, that total also, like Rhys was saying, might be a little high. I'm showing 39.5 as far as the total. And this game could either be, like a 20-10 game or a 20-17 game with a backdoor touchdown by the Jets, to cover. I can see this going down to the end too in terms of the line. But in my opinion, I think this is Buffalo's game. Defensively, I think they're just more superior than the Jets. Offensively, they'll get it done enough to win. I see a low-scoring game with Buffalo winning. The question is, can they hold off any kind of Jets backdoor cover at the end of the game?
And it'd be great to see Chris Herndon healthy, Zach Moss, the rookie, see how he's integrated. Is it really going to be him? So the loss of preseason has really clouded how we see these games. Because, we'd be, well, in preseason game 1, 2, and 3, here's the snap for carry distribution. Rhys, what are you thinking on this? Besides, you think it's low-scoring game?
We get lucky now. We get so lucky we get to see Gase mess up in a whole fantasy team again this season. But I think both quarterbacks are on a decently short leash this year, especially Darnold, as the Jets may end up tanking sooner than we would expect for Darnold's replacement, and Allen just not being very accurate. But also McDermott gets to show off his shiny new toy named Diggs against a very bad Jet secondary, whose only decent starters is Marcus May, safety.
Yeah, plus, on that note, I think, all right, Jeff, you're kind of a Bills fan, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, grew up a Bills fan. So I still have an allegiance To the Bills, yes.
That's what I thought. But here's my view of the Bills. McDermott doesn't get enough credit for how good he's had that defense, and Josh Allen gets too much credit because that offense is put into some sweet situations because of that defense.
Oh, no, I agree with that. And that's just the Buffalo way, it seems. You win with defense and barely score enough to cover, or at least attempt to cover. But as far as the fantasy spin here, I'm really interested to see what Devin Singletary does in terms of, again, snap counts and percentage of snaps versus Zach Moss. How much of Moss are we going to see? Are we going to see half and half between him and Singletary? If that's the case, then that bodes really well for Moss moving forward in the year. If not, then perhaps we see Moss kind of brought along slowly in the Buffalo offense as the team continues to play games. So I'm excited to see what happens there. And as you mentioned earlier, Stephon Diggs, how much is he going to be involved?
Yeah, especially you talk about a bruising back in a game they're supposed to be ahead most of the game. If there was ever a time, hey, we should get the rookie involved, it's one of these games, right?
Yeah, preferably if they have like a 24-7 lead or something like that. Even 17-3, 17-7, something like that, which is kind of what I see in this game. Maybe not that many points, but 24 points, that might be a little high for Buffalo. But, yeah, I mean, we could see it. We could definitely see it. A second half splurge for Moss and see what he does on a couple touches. But we don't know. And that's what the joy is of week one. We get to find out. We get more clarity.
It's Christmas. We're opening presents. And, the other piece to that is Gase really seriously going to play Gore over this is the Frank Gore revenge game. No, I'm joking. Is he going to play Gore over Bell? You know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of jump. All right. So Las Vegas, I have to watch so I don't call them Oakland. The Raiders are favored on the road, which surprises me.
Across the country.
At Carolina, favored by a field goal, 47-ish total. We, on an earlier podcast, Jeff, you were with us. We talked about Teddy, how much we like the Panthers offense. I think the Raiders defense is a nice little
start.
Yeah, cushion to get them started. How are you looking at this game?
Well, I mean, is there another team in the league that has a wider range of an offense being able to put up points and a defense just not being able to stop anybody? I think we might see that with Carolina this year, and that's great for fantasy purposes on offense. As far as them winning games, they'll be lucky to win 5 games, in my opinion. And, here they have a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, a new head coach. They have it all. So and especially in a year like this year where, preseason, limited practices, they don't have an opportunity to really gel. I mean, we've heard reports already saying that Matt Rule's not really pleased with his team and their attempt at having a play-in game, so to speak, to be prepared for the season. And, what's that going to say? So I think things could be ugly in Carolina. And if it's not, then that's a good thing. As a Panthers fan, I'm expecting the worst and hoping for the best.
Yeah, and Carr, this is a good lead-in game for him after he's been so undermined this offseason, But getting Jason Witten added to the offense, the 2 rookie receivers added to the offense, I'm expecting bigger things. Rhys, you have any thoughts on this game?
Jacobs gets the best, gets to play against the team that allowed the most PPR rushing points to running backs last year. So I think he should be very, very excited about his week 1 matchup. But also, as you guys said, he gets the Panthers get start off with a little cushion against the Raiders. So Teddy could be a good streaming option this week for quarterbacks, and DJ Moore could put up bigger game than people expect, going up against an untested rookie in Arnett as the Raiders cornerback 1.
Yeah, I just think both defenses are bad. Jeff, I had a thought. How high scoring do we expect Carolina Atlanta to be? Because both defense stink, And
I imagine pretty high, upper 40s, lower 50s, if not lower 50s is a floor.
Right.
We'll have to see. We'll see how well their offense gels with the new regime. The players are relatively the same, but the new regime, you still got to learn the playbook and execute. So you made a good point about Josh Jacobs. He's a really good start this week. Obviously, we don't really know what to expect against Carolina, but we have an idea that it's going to be pretty high scoring in terms of being able to move the ball and get some points on them, I think. So that's good news for Josh Jacobs and Derek Carr. Throw everybody in there. Darren Waller. Interested to see what Brian Edwards can do. If you recall, he played his college ball at South Carolina, so he's kind of coming home in a sense. I'm sure there'll be people in the stand. Oh, no, there won't. There'll be people who will be watching him and making sure that he does well in front of his hometown crowd, even though it's not really a crowd, but they will be cheering him on. So, yeah, I like this game actually to go over the 47 mark. So I think it's going to be a little bit higher, like a 28-24 type of game.
Unless one of the teams just lays an egg offensively. Rhys,
Right.
What are you thinking?
Well, for Jacobs doesn't get his due as pass catcher, but I also disagree with Gruden's assessment. Oh, he could catch 60 balls. But even if it turns into a run-heavy game, that's even better for Jacobs. Plus, that 30 points per game the Panthers allowed last season was with Luke Kuechly, who is now gone, and with – oh, wait, never mind. He already left. I was thinking Thomas Davis.
Yeah. And so, but on that, I don't think Jacobs could catch 60 balls from the jugs machine, but that's a different story. I think Jalen Richard's their pass catcher. All right, moving to another divisional game. Chicago at Detroit. Oddly, Detroit's a field goal favorite at home. Don't ask me what home field advantage means on two teams closely geographically located. Mitch Trubisky, healthy Matthew Stafford. Adrian Peterson going to carry the rock because Kerryon Johnson's not healthy. I'm kind of interested in this. I actually think Detroit will win this game. What do you think of Jeff?
Yeah, I have to lean towards Detroit. I think they have more weapons, and I think they have greater talent. When you talk about Matthew Stafford and Kenny Galladay, Marvin Jones, you throw T.J. Hawkinson in there. I mean, that's an excellent group of receivers, and we know that Detroit likes to pass. I'm expecting like a 60-40 ratio of pass to run in Detroit this year, which is a little bit less than last year, but still, I mean, that's pretty high considering NFL standards. So yeah, I like Detroit here. I think Chicago is still trying to figure out what their identity is on offense. Is it Allen Robinson? What are they going to do with their running game with David Montgomery out? So there's still some question marks there. Plus, well, there's a question mark just on the quarterback situation with Trubisky and Foles. And, can Trubisky do well in week one? He's going to have Foles looking over his shoulder. I don't know. It's one of those situations where we just kind of have to wait and see what happens. But there's just too much uncertainty there with Chicago's offense, in my opinion. Now, their defense is a different story. They're kind of like the opposite of Carolina, right? Strong defense, weak offense versus the opposite with Carolina. So, I don't know. It should be a good divisional matchup, and not so much in terms of fantasy explosion, I don't think, in this game. But I am excited to see what Detroit can do.
Yes, and I want to see how much the rookie Swift, how many touches he gets. The other thing that's intriguing to me is I think there's a sliver, very small, sliver of a chance that Cordero Patterson is the running back for the Bears. The other thought I had is I think it's going to be a low-scoring game that's dictated by the Bears defense because Detroit's not going to be able to score that many points on them. And lastly, I fully expect before halftime that if there were, we'll see it on Twitter because there won't be fans in the stands, but the boo birds will be out for Trubisky before halftime.
Yeah, and that game is at 44 is the total. I'm thinking under on that as well. 44 seems like an awful lot against the Bears defense week one.
Yes.
Well, the thought I have on this game is A-Rob gets to go up against a rookie cornerback or someone who wasn't good enough of a cornerback in Atlanta. So I think A-Rob could explode out in this game, especially with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback just peppering him with targets.
But even so it's great on the fantasy. I don't know how many touchdowns Chicago's going to score, or how they're going to score them. You know, that's the thing I get is how's Chicago going to score touchdowns?
Yeah, right.
Defensively, Eddie Jackson.
Exactly, or Khalil Mack.
Devin Hester's not walking through that door.
No, not unless he has a cane and a walker.
Patterson, maybe.
It's been some years.
Yeah.
So I laugh at this, Jeff, because only in the fantasy world can we who are older look at guys younger than us and call them too old to do their job. You know what I mean? Like, only in the fantasy world can we do that. All right, another divisional game. Indianapolis, big favorite at Jacksonville. We get to see Phillip Rivers. We see a Jacksonville team that's tanking for Trevor. There's a lot of people on Minshew thinking he and DJ Shark are going to light it up. D.D. Westbrook started on the third team on the depth chart, which I don't really take, any creed in. But I'm really interested to see if Indy, with Jonathan Taylor, Rivers, how are they going to do? Jeff, you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, like you already mentioned, this game leans heavily towards Indianapolis. I am excited to see what Jacksonville is going to do at running back, because you've got fantasy teams, especially with deeper leagues, who are looking to see, all right, who's going to emerge there, and is this someone I can even possibly grab on the waiver wire? So you've got Azigbo, and you've got James Robinson as those who could potentially be that. But still, we're talking about a Jaguars running back. How much fantasy relevance and value are they going to have? But in the deeper leagues, people want to know. So that's an interesting storyline that I have. But as far as the Colts are concerned, I'm interested in seeing what Paris Campbell can do and how they open him up in the offense. Phillip Rivers, T.Y. Hilton, of course, seems like he's going to be his favorite target. But how much is Campbell going to see? How much is Michael Pittman going to see in terms of snaps? And then, of course, you've got the Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack duel, where Mack is the incumbent running back, and he's the one who most likely will probably see the majority of the carries here week one as Taylor kind of gets more in tune with the NFL game, the whole process and everything. There's some concern about ball security, so they may not want to unleash him. That is, of course, unless the game is just out of hand in the second half, they just see what he can do and he goes off. So that's kind of how I see this game.
I could see that too, but the one guy I think in the Jacksonville backfield that could see is Chris Thompson. They're always going to be behind. He was with Gruden in Washington. I could see him getting more receptions than Josh Jacobs this year.
Yeah.
Just because they're playing from behind and that sort of. I mean, look how many receptions did Fournette have? 70-something last year?
70.
Yeah.
And so, could Thompson have more than that this year in the year, as they're tanking? Sure. Rhys, what are you thinking?
Well, for whatever running back starting against for the Jaguars, what better way to start off your career than going up against DeForest Buckner, right?
Yes.
But for Chark and Westbrook or whoever's the wide receiver too, they go up against a weaker Colts secondary compared to the rest of their team. So you could see Chark and the rest of them explode off, especially in garbage time. And as far as the Colts are concerned, the Jaguars gave up the second most PPR fantasy points to running backs last season. So both Taylor and Mack could possibly be fantasy viable this week in deeper leagues or have a lot of flex.
I think Chenault's the wide receiver too in Jacksonville. But to your point, if you're losing and you're a team that's just getting drummed every week, you're going to give up a lot of points to fantasy running backs, right? I mean, not to be Captain Obvious, but I bet they gave up a lot more than Kansas City did playing with the lead, or Baltimore, because of the touchdowns. All right, Jeff, we're rocking and rolling through this. Another divisional game, one I really like. Green Bay at Minnesota. Minnesota's a 2-3-point favorite. Green Bay, was it a fluke? Their 13 wins last year. Aaron Jones, big touchdowns. Minnesota got rid of Diggs, but Dalvin Cook doesn't have a new deal. It's pretty interesting to me. Olabisi Johnson's their receiver 2. Justin Jefferson's 3 in Minnesota. Irv Smith, many are predicting a breakout. Green Bay did not fortify their receivers. Everybody's talking about which one will step up. Is it Lazard or whomever? Plus, the last guy I want to talk about for Green Bay, Tanyan, the tight end who is listed first on the depth chart. He's free in fantasy leagues, even dynasty leagues. He's free because everybody's rostered Jay Sternberger. What are you thinking, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, Robert Tanyan's someone to look at as a very deep type of waiver wire possibility. But again, we're talking about Green Bay tight ends, and they just seem to be non-existent in Aaron Rodgers' world. The wide receivers being the ones who score. I think this has the potential for us to be a little bit surprised, maybe in a negative way, about Green Bay this year. I'm not sure about them, and this is a divisional game, so I think they're going to put up a fight against Minnesota. But if Green Bay comes out and they're not great, you got Aaron Rodgers, who's another year older. Vegas has them scheduled, or they have the team, projected for 9 wins as far as the win-loss over-under. After winning 13 last year, so they'd see a decline. But the winner of this game is going to have the hand up on the other in terms of the division, which is going to be tight. It's going to be close, but I don't know. I'm kind of leaning Minnesota here. I'm really curious to see how they get Irv Smith more involved, because I'm hearing more and more about that. Of course, you got Adam Thielen coming back. There's no Diggs. What's Justin Jefferson going to do? How well is Dalvin Cook going to be involved in the offense now that Stefanski is gone? Lots of questions there. But I'm leaning Minnesota here as the winner. Green Bay, I think, could be a little bit disappointing, not just in this game, but also the entire season.
Think about it this way, and then I'll turn over to Rhys. If Detroit does beat Chicago and Minnesota beats Green Bay, now Green Bay is tied for last in the division, and it's a hard fight upward. Rhys, what are you thinking?
Well, the one I'm surprised you didn't talk about, Jeff, is A.J. Dillon, their second-round pick, the one they skipped a wide receiver for, is their running back 3 on their depth chart, and news came out today that Aaron Jones is saying he might get a new deal soon. So that's a big blow to Dillon supporters. And Dillon matches up against a exciting young corner by the name of Jair Alexander. And so Dillon could beat him up pretty bad, or it could go the other way. As even in the playoffs last season, we saw Dillon torch the Saints and then pretty much be not a non-factor against the 49ers.
But I think Minnesota's offense, this is just me, they show nothing new. It's like they do the Kubiak Zimmer combination, and they're going to beat you with talent. They're not going to beat you with scheme. Dalvin Cook, I think, will be the deciding factor in this game. So, Jeff, here's a game that I disagree with most people. I saw, and I sent this to Rhys just because I thought it was so fraudulent. Peter King's Football Morning in America, or whatever it is, on Mondays, had Miami to win the division. And I was thinking, how out of touch are we? And so we'll find out this week, as Miami is in New England. They're thankful to play in New England when the weather's warm and not cold. True. And they're 7-point dogs against Cam Newton. I mean, there's a lot of storylines. You have Ryan Fitzpatrick. The one thing about Miami, so Parker's been nicked up, all that stuff. But I'm interested to see how they use the running games with Jordan Howard and Matt Breida, as well as on the New England side with Damian Harris on IR. And are we going to – Sony Michel slow to come back? Is it just going to be James White and Rex Burkhead? But anyway, it'll be interesting for me on that, just on the fantasy thought of, do I want any guys in this game? that I'd like the two quarterbacks. If I want any of them, I want the quarterbacks because I could see Fitzpatrick throwing for a lot of yards, maybe not a lot of touchdowns, but a lot of yards.
Yeah, there's just a lot of uncertainty in this, and that also you can say the same in terms of fantasy value too. You just don't know how each team's going to score. Are they going to be consistent? Is there going to be a lot of punts in this game? We don't know. I mean, New England had an unstoppable defense last year, but then again, you've got players who have opted out. You've got players who changed teams. You've got, it's a slightly different defense, right? But it's still, the Patriots still had a strong defense last year. It's not like they're going to roll over. And how well is Ryan Fitzpatrick going to come, off the blocks here week one? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of question marks here. Cam Newton, of course. What can he do? What is he going to do with Sony Michel and James White at running back and Rex Burkhead? I don't see a whole lot of fantasy value in this game. This is kind of one of these games where I don't really have a lot of fantasy talent in this game, so I'm not really looking at it too much, and I don't really see it as a high-scoring game, though. Do you?
No, but it's a 43 total, which is kind of crazy to me. And
Yeah.
Cam Newton, I mean, Vegas must think that Cam Newton is the Cam Newton of 2015, 2018, something like that, because the Cam Newton we saw last wouldn't be responsible for putting up 25, 28 points on that offense with those limited weapons. I mean, who do they have at receiver besides Edelman? They don't have a tight end.
Right.
Their running backs. I go down the line, but you bring up a great point that we do have faith in Belichick, Josh McDaniels, and the coaching staff. Rhys,
Yeah, Rhys, what do you got on this, Rhys?
he's studied. He's got the steam coming on us.
So the matchup I'm most interested to see is Devontae Parker versus Stephon Gilmore. Last time they played, Parker nearly cost Gilmore his Defensive Player of the Year trophy when he put up like 100 yards on him. But I want to see if this is a fluke, and if it's not a fluke, then we have to ask the question: is Parker better than, let's say, A.J. Brown or Amari Cooper, who got completely shut down by Stephon Gilmore?
That is interesting, especially because Miami isn't this juggernaut of offense.
Not like the Cowboys are, or even
Right.
the Titans.
Right. But the new running backs for Miami will be interesting to me, just because Jordan Howard's had moderate success. Breida's had moderate success. It'll be interesting. So
There's not enough clarity for me to really kind of make any kind of statement on what I think is going to happen in this game. And for the line to be 6.5, I would be all over Miami in this as getting points.
Yeah, I mean,
we'll see.
down the stretch, Miami won a lot of games down the stretch last year.
Yeah, right.
This is a revenge game, Flores against his old master, and the master thought process and Belichick. Because Belichick has had a spell on all of his former coaches. I mean, how many of them have been successful?
Not very many.
Not against him, especially. You know what I'm saying? And so, all right, it's another divisional game. Philadelphia 6-point favorite at Washington. We can't call them the Redskins. They're the Washington football team. And so, Miles, if Philly's got a big lead, does Miles Sanders pound the rock? Or, is he help? Why even pound him? Why even risk him? Is it Boston Scott? And then I saw Alshon Jeffrey's out until like week 7. Jalen Reagor, they said hopefully week 2. I will say the one guy that I love in this game from a fantasy point of view, just like week 1 last year, is Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson killed it in week 1 last year. Rhys is pointing to his notes. Rhys, what did Deshaun Jackson do? He and I hadn't talked about this.
He caught 8 passes for 154 yards and 2 touchdowns against his former team, the Redskins.
Yeah. And so I think that this could be a game. Plus, it'll be interesting to see how Antonio Gibson does at running back and Peyton Barber. We know what Peyton Barber is. Mm-hmm. And Haskins, Logan Thomas at tight end. Can McLaurin rack it up in junk, garbage time. What are you thinking on this, Jeff?
So yeah, I mean, everyone's talking about Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin and throw Steve Sims in there, right? Those are good fantasy commodities, right? And yet we're thinking, oh, this Washington team is not going to be very good. They're going to be lucky to win 5 games. Well, if their offensive players are so good, they're going to have to do somewhat well. So I'm excited to see what happens there. How much of an offense are we talking about here? What kind of transition do we see Dwayne Haskins in his second year? And then also looking at the Philadelphia side, we're going to see a lot of Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Is Goddard okay with his finger?
Yes.
He should be good, right? So yeah, I mean, you've a lot of 12 personnel there. We get to see what Miles Sanders can do with another year of experience. So it should be a good divisional matchup game, and I'm excited to see what the result is here of those fantasy players that I already mentioned, and seeing how well they do. And are they contenders or are they pretenders in terms of setting them in your lineup? And excellent call on Deshaun Jackson. I think he's someone who could be a really strong type of fantasy flex option at the least in the first half of the season, especially.
Oh yeah, and I will say I'm anti-Washington, not because I care about Snyder or any of that. I just don't think they're very, very much talent, and I think Rivera's got his work cut out for him. What are you thinking, Rhys? What else did I miss?
You mentioned Scary Terry, but McLaurin plays Darius Slay, which is not a good matchup for him, especially against an Eagles team that knows Haskins isn't the best quarterback, and Haskins isn't exactly the most accurate quarterback either.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. They'll put the youngster under pressure, but I think Philly run rules them. I can't see Washington unless Gibson's way better than I saw him in college. I just can't. I can't get there.
No. There's a reason he only got 33 carries, right?
Yeah, but also I'm interested to see how Bryce Love looks. Thing about Gibson is he had Pollard come out before him, and he's got Gainwell, another NFL prospect, behind him. It's kind of interesting. Memphis is loading up on these running backs after their last quarterback, Paxton Lynch, flopped, right?
Oh, you're left out Darrell Henderson too.
Yes, you're right.
Yep. No, yeah, good call about the Memphis running backs, and even going back to D'Angelo Williams too. It seems like running back is their strong suit.
So let's move to another game I'm pretty interested in, and I'm actually thinking there's an upset in this game. Chargers favored by 3 at Cincinnati. The Tyrod I saw in Buffalo, his last game in Buffalo, last season, I don't think he's that good. And I'm not saying Burrow first start's going to be great. Home field, I really think that Cincinnati's going to come to play. Chargers, I just don't see them. Also, I think that over-under of 43 seems a bit high. Fantasy players, Mixon got a new deal. A.J. Green is hoping to be healthy. He's not 100%. Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate on one side. Also, the Chargers, who's going to be their receiver 2? Is Hunter Henry healthy? And what's going to be their running back
splits?
Yes, with Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, right? Jeff, what are you thinking?
Well, you mentioned a lot, especially in terms of the fantasy player. No, that's okay. I do think that Keenan Allen is you mentioned we don't know who the wide receiver 2 will be on the Chargers. If that's the case, then that's a really good sign for Keenan Allen. I think he's someone who could get 10 targets a game just simply because there's not a lot of talent around him. Eckler, of course, is going to get some targets as well. We're curious to see what Josh Kelly does, how many touches he gets. Justin Jackson as well. What's the ratio between him and Kelly? As far as Tyrod Taylor goes, I'm excited to see what he can do. I think we might be surprised. He's going to run a lot. And of course, we know that dual threat quarterbacks do well, fantasy speaking. So I think there's some fantasy value there for Tyrod Taylor that's kind of hidden a little bit. As far as Cincinnati, you mentioned all the names: Mixon, Burrow, AJ Green, Tyler Boyd. Those are guys that are just going to get the ball, every week. And, what's not to like about that? So, yeah, I like the fact that Cincinnati could come out strong, but they could also come out kind of weak, not knowing exactly what Joe Burrow is going to do. How well is he going to be in his first NFL game? Is he going to be – are we going to be talking about him as someone that we laud, or is he going to be someone that, we're kind of jeering a little bit? So I can see both sides of that. And but I think that if we had to make a decision, I'd say that he does pretty well in his debut.
For me, my dad mentioned both Green and Boyd. I don't see them or on tape being fantasy viable this week as they go up against Desmond Keene, Chris Harris Jr., Casey Hayward as a really good threesome of cornerbacks to try to throw up against in Joe Burrow's first game. And then Eckler, my dad mentioned not going to be able to he doesn't trust Tyrod. Well, if that's the case with Anthony Lynn, if you can't throw the ball, you'll have to run the ball, which then brings in Austin Eckler. And the Bengals on average, gave up 26 points to running backs last season in fantasy.
Which is a lot. And I think Eckler will do okay. And you're right, Tyrod, he could have 50 rushing yards. He could only throw for 150 passing, but he could have 50 rushing and be a middle quarterback too, right? Is that what you're thinking, Jeff?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he averages 36 yards rushing per game in his career, which, that's great for a dual threat quarterback. And that's an extra 3-4 points a week that you're getting in terms of fantasy production.
Oh, yes. All right. So now we're getting into the exciting games for fantasy owners, fantasy managers. Tampa Bay, Road Dogs at New Orleans. Kamara and his team are finalizing a deal. Tom Brady's bringing everybody, including the kitchen sink, with him. Gronk, Fournette. Todd Bowles had the defense playing well down the stretch. And then New Orleans, I think this is just my view. I think we take Drew Brees and New Orleans for granted how long they've been good and how good they've been. I won't go too much. I'll let you fill in the blanks there, Jeff, if you want.
Well, this just seems like a fun, exciting game to watch, and there's fantasy implications everywhere. The Saints, of course, they're returning everybody in terms of coaching and Drew Brees, and they're getting Emmanuel Sanders too, which is, in addition to the offense, that's going to be much better than what it was last year with Ted Ginn as their wide receiver 2 over Michael Thomas. So I'm excited to see what everybody does with the Saints and with the Bucs, what Tom Brady can do. How well can he be in terms of what he was last year? Remember, he finished, quarterback 13 last year, I believe. That was his final rank, depending on scoring, of course. But that's outside of the top 10. And this is the second year in a row he was outside of the top 10. So is it possible that Brady has, turned a corner and this is the sunset of his career? We know that. But from a decline standpoint, or was it just the fact that New England didn't have the weapons that, of course, he's going to have this year? So there's some uncertainty there, but I think a lot of people are leaning Brady and being able to pull it out. He seems like he's healthy. He seems like he's ready to go. He knows the offense, of course. I'm really curious to see how well this Tampa offense meshes with Brady week 1 and how they kind of can build on that throughout the year. So, yeah, like I said, there's a lot of fun, exciting fantasy players to watch in this game. And this is just one of these games that you just are going to enjoy watching on. Was it Monday night or is it
Monday night? Afternoon. I wish it was prime time. I think this game should be prime time.
Definitely.
Should, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if we can watch it then, this would be a very good game to watch. I'm sorry, I thought it was a national televised game.
Oh no, it might be, but it's the Fox afternoon game. Since Dallas is playing that night, it'll be the major afternoon game.
My thoughts are the Bucs gave away allowed the most PPR fantasy points to wide receivers last year. So that means Michael Thomas should have a big game. Manuel Sanders could even have a legitimate flex play this week. But the one that was kind of surprising is the Bucs allowed the second fewest PPR points to running backs. And I'm not saying don't start Alvin Kamara, but don't expect too much from him.
Yeah, the other part to that, I think New Orleans plays much better at home in the Dome. But that may have been with their crowd noise, not this fake stuff.
We're going to find that out, I think, Jeff.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to that game. And, New Orleans, we always expect shootouts because it's Drew Brees. And they're usually lower scoring games.
Except for 49ers. That was a good game to watch, too, though.
Yeah.
Except for Cook getting injured.
All right, moving on. We have 4 more. Arizona at San Fran. San Fran's touchdown favorite. So you have the highfalutin Arizona offense against solid defense in San Francisco and a good running game. Their Debo is 50-50. Ayuk's hurt. Sanders is gone off of that offense. It's going to be interesting, Jeff.
Yeah, and Arizona had their number twice last year, didn't they? If I'm not mistaken, did they win one and lose the other, but it was really close in the second game?
I think so. I think they split.
I think if I'm looking at game logs, which I'm not, I think that's the case. But yeah, San Francisco, of course, they have some questions at receiver right now with Deebo Samuel hurt. We're not sure if he's going to play. You've got questions on how well and how much involvement Brandon Ayuk's going to have. This seems to me like a George Kittle game and the running game, and of course defense. They're going to have to do a lot against Arizona because we know that they're more of a high tempo type of offense. Lots of weapons, especially adding DeAndre Hopkins to the mix. Curious to see what Kenyon Drake is going to do now that he's the main guy, and now we're looking at him for the main load. We're looking at probably 17, 20 touches a game for him. So will he be able to handle that? And a division rival like this, I like Arizona to be like an 8-8 or 9-7 team this year, but San Francisco most likely is going to win 11 or 12 games. I'm kind of leaning more towards 11. So I think San Francisco wins this game, but it's going to be closer than you think. And I don't really like the high total of 47 points. I think it's going to be lower than that.
Right. I think most people, that's because of Arizona's defense and Mostert running well down the stretch. The other piece to that is Jordan Reed could sneak in, and because he signed with San Francisco, and be that missing piece at receiver. And last thing on Drake is before last year coming to Arizona, he'd never had more than 133 carries in a season in Miami. You can blame it on Gase. You can blame it on a lot of things, but I have doubts that he's going to have 20 touches a game and be able to hold up. Yep.
He could hit a wall come week 12, 13, something like that.
Or the wall could hit him.
Yes.
Jimmy Garoppolo last year averaged 29.5 points per game against the Cardinals and only 13.5 against everyone else. So this is one of the 2 weeks you definitely want to start him.
So you're saying Garoppolo averages 29 points per game fantasy against the Cardinals and 13 against everyone else?
Yes. One of the weirder splits in the
wow, that's interesting.
The matchup one of the most one-on-one matchups I'm most interested to see is rookie Isaiah Simmons matched up against George Kittle. See how well he's adapted to the NFL game against the premier tight end, all-around tight end in terms of blocking and receiving. But also Hopkins starts off his Cardinals career. Either he's going to go up against Sherman or lining up on the right side of the field. So it's not exactly the most favorable first welcome to the desert matchup for him.
But he did get a 2-year extension this week. All right, moving on. So I think we all kind of like this game more from a watching football standpoint than fantasy, but it should be interesting to play out. So the Sunday night game is Dallas at the Rams. Dallas is favored by 3 points. High total over 50. I think this point spread is because everybody has Dallas as the darling, and I'm unsure about that. And
New coach.
yes,
You know,
and
there's still, concern there. I mean, you have to. Dallas is a juggernaut, right? We get it. They've got a lot of talent, but new coach. That means you got to learn new. Of course, Kellen Moore is still there, so the offense is somewhat intact, right? If they're indeed going with the same type of offense that they had in 2019, does McCarthy have any say in that? I don't think so. In terms of why would he change the offense that worked well? But it's possible that there could be, some growing pains with Dallas. And I said there might be growing pains with Green Bay. I think there might be some growing pains with Dallas too. And then we all know in the NFL, we talked about this at the beginning of the show, that in week 1, we tend to see teams kind of not perform the way that we expect, especially teams that we think are going to win. I would not be surprised. And I mean, what did Dallas finish? 8-8 last year, right?
I think so. I think
that
that's
right?
like the Jason Garrett motto, always even, never odd.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, yes, they have a lot of talent, but they also, they know how to win and they also know how to lose. And we could say the same here with the Rams too. I mean, I kind of see the Rams as the last place team in the NFC West, as strong as that is. But someone's got to be last. This is going to be a big test for them against Dallas, and literally both teams. But I'm excited to see what the Rams do on offense in terms of the running game. Cam Akers, how involved is he going to be? Malcolm Brown, what are we going to see from him? I'm excited to see what Van Jefferson does. He's a player that I'm really excited about as a guy who, most people got him near the end of the draft, if drafted at all. So he could be someone you could target as a waiver pick, especially if you drafted earlier in the fantasy season. I'm excited to see what he can do. I think we're going to see a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, which means he'll be on the field. And the same thing for Dallas, too. Their trio of receivers. How much are we going to be in love with CeeDee Lamb? There's a lot of speculation that he's the best receiver on the team, which, in my opinion, that seems a little bit strong. But, we've seen it before. We'll see what happens there. There's a lot to watch in this game.
So let me take two points there. First of all, it will be interesting to see how much the Rams play 12 personnel versus the third wide receiver, right? Because Higbee's healthy, Everett's healthy. Second of all, rookie receiver, Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb, whoever we think of. If we think back to how they perform slow out of the gate normally, we have to assume that they're each going to be slow out of the gate this time, right?
Yeah. Usually rookie receivers are. It takes a couple weeks for them to really kind of get in the flow of things.
Yeah.
And we kind of saw that with McLaurin started off pretty strong right out the gate last year. But for the most part, rookies like A.J. Brown, right? He didn't really have a strong showing until like week 9, week 10 when Ryan Tannehill became quarterback. And I'm not sure if it was completely all Tannehill, but just the fact that, he's becoming more and more in tune with the offense and such. So, yeah, I think we will see a little bit of a learning curve with the rookie receivers, but I'm just still excited to see what Lamb can do with even minimal touches.
I think Gallup could lead that team in receiving yards.
Yes. But one of the quickest phase when I think of the matchups, Cooper versus Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey's probably a top 3 cornerback, pretty much no matter who you ask, besides if you're asking the number 4 corner.
If you ask him, I'm sure he'll tell you.
Yeah, he'll be number 1.
He is. But Amari Cooper struggles against better competition, as do the Cowboys in general, but especially Cooper. And Gallup gets Troy Hill, and that's the worst case scenario for him. He could end up with guys you've barely even heard of lining up against him. So that's definitely a plus on the Gallup side. And the Cowboys allowed the 3rd most tight end points per game in PPR. And Rams have 2 good ones in Everett and Higbee, but there's a huge gap in ADP. So Everett is probably unrostered in most leagues. So if you're streaming tight ends, he's a pretty good one this week to stream, especially with him outperforming Higbee when both tight ends were healthy
last year.
Yes.
So now we're left to the 2 Monday night games, finishing strong here, Jeff. Pittsburgh at the Giants. Pittsburgh 6-point favorite, 47 total. Roethlisberger, is he healthy? James Conner. Who's going to be is it Deontay Johnson really going to show out? Ebron. And then on the Giants side, is their defense as bad as we think they are? Because Pittsburgh could light them up.
Oh, easily.
What are you thinking, Jeff?
Yeah, Pittsburgh definitely could light them up. I mean, if they are an almost playoff team with Duck Hodges at quarterback, what can they do with – I'm sorry, I have to laugh whenever I hear that name. What can they do with Roethlisberger, coming back, and he looks strong, and he's kind of thinned down a little bit, but we've seen him in the past. You've got Juju Smith-Schuster. You mentioned Deontay Johnson, Eric Ebron, James Conner. There's a lot of fantasy players in this game that I'm excited to see what they're going to be able to produce, Roethlisberger included. And, of course, we know the Pittsburgh defense is pretty strong. What kind of impact will that have on Saquon Barkley and the Giants? Like you said, this could be a game where Pittsburgh just blows them out. And I'm kind of leaning that way, especially if they can stop Barkley. I think you stop Barkley, you can stop the Giants. It's that simple.
Well, my thought is, I don't think the Giants are. If you shut down Barkley, the Giants become one-dimensional, making them easier to shut down. But also, Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones, was a very good quarterback down the stretch. For the final 8 games, he had 18 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. So if he can knock down his turnover problem, his little one, I'd say little sarcastically, but if he can knock that down, I'm still expecting the Steelers to blow him out, but the Giants may have a little bit of garbage time fantasy appeal.
May put a fight up. All right, closing strong. Tennessee at Rhys's beloved Broncos.
Especially with the Miller news breaking.
Yeah. Don't know if you saw this, Jeff, but Von Miller is out for the year. He got an ankle injury today, Tuesday.
Shoot, I did not hear that.
And
wow.
So without Von Miller, Broncos are a little strung tight on defense. Improved on offense. Drew Lock year 2, Fant, bring in Melvin Gordon. The rumors are that Lindsey and Gordon are going to split 50-50 the time, which makes Gordon way overpriced and Lindsey way under.
Right.
But also, what's Jerry Jeudy going to look like? It's going to be interesting for me. And on Tennessee, is Tannehill going to really be awesome like he was last year down the stretch? And A.J. Brown, Derrick Henry? What are you thinking there, Jeff?
Well, I mean, Tennessee went deep into the playoffs, and they had their chance to continue. I think they've got something down well with Derrick Henry, of course, and the Kari Blossom game blocking, their fullback. Once they introduced him into the offense, things just really kind of took over. And teams knew that Henry was going to get the ball, and they couldn't stop him. And when they did try to stop him, guess what? A.J. Brown was available and open. Jonnu Smith is someone who's also kind of coming into his own. I think we'll see him more as a threat, especially after the catch, which is rare to see with tight ends. I kind of like Tennessee in this game. I'm excited to see what Jerry Jeudy does because he's a guy that I've planted my flag on. I really like what he brings to the table. I love the fact that he's a 5-tool type of player. I think he's going to be involved in the offense from week 1. And ultimately, I think that he could lead the team in receptions, even over Cortland Sutton. He's just that type of a player. He's more of a possession type of player, and those are the guys who get the catches. And he's definitely capable. So you mentioned the Lindsey and Gordon split. I think we could definitely see that. But I do think, though, that Gordon is a back who excels when he can get into a rhythm. And if he can't get into that rhythm because of Lindsey getting carries, we could see Gordon kind of being a little bit disappointing in terms of fantasy production. So there's that to look out for. This is just, I think Tennessee's going to win this game. I think Derrick Henry is the driving force behind that, and Tannehill will do enough and make timely throws. I think A.J. Brown will be involved. This is not a game that Tannehill needs to win with his arm, but we could see a big game from Brown as a result, maybe 60 yards, 70 yards, and a touchdown. It's possible. I don't see him having a 100-yard game. This is a Derrick Henry type of game, and I think Tennessee wins.
The two pieces I want to add is I think if Denver's behind, Gordon's going to be the one getting the receptions, not Lindsey. And second of all, I'm super excited to see Darrington Evans and how much work, how he's used, because I'm very high on him. Rhys?
Yeah, there's been you could talk a little bit more about Darrington Evans if you want to. I've heard comparisons to an Alvin Kamara type of skill set.
I chose him over Gibson in many dynasty leagues, and many people are like, "Ooh, you made a bad choice," and I probably did in the short term. But I really like Evans, how he's looked. He's from App State. But Rhys, what are you thinking? This is your beloved. You've been dealt a shock with Von Miller going down.
We still have Chubb, and this is a Jarrell Casey revenge game with him being traded and talking about how he was treated like trash, being thrown out. I think it was more of a salary that they threw out on purpose.
Yes.
But I am excited to see Judy and Sutton go bonkers against a depleted secondary. And also, you mentioned this was a Derrick Henry game. Last time these two teams played, Henry only scored 3.2 fantasy points, and Titans were shut out 16-0.
Fangio.
When was that? What year was that? Was that in the Fangio?
That was last year. 16-0.
Okay.
I was waiting for that. That was 1953. Never mind. No, it's just joking. But I mean, Fangio is a good defensive coordinator, and he's a good coach, and so you got to give him credit there. Yes. Jeff, this time is rocked through. I can't believe it's been well over an hour. We thank you for your expertise and your time joining Rhys and I, and thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It was a fun, enjoyable experience. I definitely appreciate each one of your takes. And Rhys, keep on bringing those stats and that information. That's strong stuff, man. Thanks for doing the legwork there.
Yeah, much more than his old man. But we'll have you on again this season, Jeff.
All right, good. Sounds good. Thanks.
Have a
Enjoy
great
week one.
Have a great one.
Bye.